I paid for a dead body, but it wasn't dead. Now it won't leave me alone. The insomnia started subtly, a restlessness that crept in after midnight. Now, sleep was a distant memory, a luxury I could only glimpse in the faces of strangers on the street. I was always tired, perpetually shrouded in a fog of exhaustion that only amplified my compulsions. Taxidermy wasn't just a hobby, it was a way to control something, to fix it in time when everything else felt like it was decaying around me. My workshop, a converted basement in my inherited Victorian house, was my sanctuary. The air, thick with the smell of formaldehyde and sawdust, was almost comforting. I worked with animals mostly. Squirrels, foxes, the occasional stray cat, unfortunate enough to wander into my yard. But lately, the animals weren't enough. They lacked depth. I needed something more. Something that truly captured the essence of life, or rather, the fleeting moment before it vanished. That's how I found Mac. He operated in the shadows, a ghost in the online forums where the ethically flexible congregated. He called himself a resource facilitator. I called him a lifeline. "I have something you might be interested in," he typed, his words appearing on my monitor late one night. A fresh Jane Doe, untraceable, clean. The price was exorbitant, more than I'd ever spent on anything, living or otherwise. But the thought of creating the ultimate piece, something that would transcend the mundane, the ordinary, I couldn't resist. The death certificate arrived a week later, a flimsy piece of paper stating the cause of death as undetermined. It didn't quell my unease, but I pushed it down. I needed this. The delivery was late, a nondescript van pulling up to my back gate after midnight. Mac was there, his face obscured by the dim light. He gestured to the back of the van. "She's all yours." "Remember our agreement." His voice was a low rumble. No questions. The package was heavy, wrapped in thick plastic sheeting. Mac helped me wrestle it into the basement. As soon as he left, I tore away the plastic. She was intact, remarkably so. Young, maybe early 20s, dark hair, pale skin, almost peaceful. I felt a thrill course through me, a mix of excitement and something akin to guilt. I pushed the guilt aside. This was art. I started the embalming process, meticulously following the procedures I'd perfected over years. It was during the arterial injection that I saw it. A twitch. Just the flicker of movement in her left hand. I dismissed it as a muscle spasm, a post-mortem reflex. But then it happened again. And again. My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't right. I placed my hand on her wrist. A faint, thready pulse. She wasn't dead. Panic seized me. What had I done? I'd paid for a dead body, and got this. I should call the police. An ambulance. I knew I should, but the thought of explaining, of facing the consequences, it paralyzed me. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it, that the lack of sleep was finally taking its toll. But the pulse remained. I thought about ending it, finishing what Mac had started. It would be the logical thing to do, but I couldn't. Something held me back. Instead, I found a sedative in my medicine cabinet, leftover from a root canal years ago. I injected her with it. It didn't knock her out completely, but it slowed her down, made her movements sluggish. That night, I didn't sleep. I watched her, my eyes glued to her still form on the embalming table. The basement felt colder than usual, the shadows deeper, more menacing. The next few days were a blur. I kept her sedated, administering the drug whenever she started to stir. I told myself I was buying time, trying to figure out what to do. But deep down, I knew I was just delaying the inevitable. My insomnia worsened. I started seeing things. Shadows moving in the periphery, whispers in the silence. I was losing my grip. I finally broke down and called Dr. Holloway, my general practitioner. I described my symptoms, the sleeplessness, the anxiety. I danced around the specifics of my work, vaguely referring to delicate projects. She prescribed sleeping pills, but they didn't work. "Maybe you should consider talking to a therapist, Elias," she suggested, her voice laced with concern. "It sounds like you're under a lot of stress." I ignored her advice. I couldn't risk telling anyone the truth. Then, one evening, the sedative stopped working. I gave her a double dose, but she still woke up. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked at me. There was no recognition in her gaze, just confusion. She tried to sit up, but her limbs were weak, uncoordinated. "Where am I?" Her voice was raspy, barely a whisper. I didn't answer. I couldn't. She looked around the basement, her eyes widening in fear. "What is this place?" I backed away, my heart pounding. She was alive, and she was looking at me like I was a monster. Over the next few weeks, she slowly regained her strength. I kept her locked in the basement, bringing her food and water. She didn't try to escape, not at first. She seemed lost, confused. She started asking questions. Who was I? Why was she here? What had happened to her? I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. I lied, telling her she'd been in an accident, that I was taking care of her. She seemed to accept it, at least for a while. But then she started remembering things, fragments of her past. A name, Sarah. A town, maybe somewhere in Pennsylvania. A feeling of dread. The dependence she showed me at first shifted to a strange kind of gratitude. She helped me clean the workshop, organizing my tools, keeping the space tidy. She seemed eager to please, desperate for any kind of human connection. Mrs. Gable, my elderly neighbor, started getting suspicious. She saw me carrying trays of food down to the basement. She heard strange noises coming from my house late at night. She started giving me sideways glances, her lips pursed in disapproval. Then one afternoon, she saw Sarah. Sarah was standing by the basement window, staring out at the overgrown garden. Mrs. Gable caught a glimpse of her face. That night, Sergeant Harding, a gruff, world-weary detective, showed up at my door. He was investigating a missing persons case, a young woman who disappeared from a neighboring town. He asked me if I'd seen anything, if I'd noticed anything unusual. I lied. I told him I hadn't seen anything. He didn't seem convinced. The walls were closing in. I knew it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. The next day, Harding returned with a search warrant. My heart sank. As he searched the house, I led him away from the basement, trying to distract him with meaningless chatter. But I could see the suspicion in his eyes. Suddenly, there was a scream. It came from outside. Mrs. Gable. Sarah had seen her peering through the basement window, watching us. In a moment of protective madness, fueled by fear and a desperate need to keep me safe, she'd gone outside and attacked her. I ran outside, my mind reeling. Mrs. Gable was lying on the ground, unconscious. Sarah was standing over her, her eyes wide with terror. Harding drew his weapon. "Freeze." "Police." Sarah didn't move. She just stared at me, her face a mask of confusion and despair. "Elias?" she whispered. "What's happening?" I snapped. The pressure, the guilt, the fear, it all became too much. I started babbling, trying to explain everything, but my words came out garbled and incoherent. Harding didn't understand. He thought I was insane. In the chaos, Sarah ran. She fled into the woods behind my house, disappearing into the dense undergrowth. I was arrested, taken to the local police station and interrogated for hours. I tried to explain, but my story sounded ludicrous, unbelievable. They thought I was responsible for Mrs. Gable's injuries, for Sarah's disappearance. Dr. Holloway was called in to assess my mental state. She listened to my rambling accounts, her expression a mixture of concern and disbelief. She couldn't reconcile the man she knew with the monster I seemed to have become. Eventually, I was released. There wasn't enough evidence to hold me. Mrs. Gable was in a coma, unable to testify. Sarah was still missing. I returned to my house, a pariah in my own town. The house felt different now, empty and cold. The air was thick with the stench of decay, both literal and metaphorical. I went down to the basement. It was a mess. Tools scattered, supplies overturned. The embalming table was empty. I climbed the stairs slowly, my legs heavy. I didn't know what to expect. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard a noise, a creak. It came from my bedroom. I hesitated, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. I pushed it open. Sarah was there. She was standing by the window, looking out at the night. She turned to face me, her expression unreadable. I couldn't tell if she was angry, afraid, or something else entirely. Her eyes were dark and hollow, reflecting the moonlight. She took a step towards me. "Elias," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The floorboard creaked. And then, silence.